All right, we're bringing in a Mets fan. Grandma's going to love this one. Matt Matera, Matty4_Matera, the man, the one and only. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
I'm doing well, Jay. I got to say, when you just mentioned that your grandma texted you, I remember you saying before that your grandma's a big-time Mets fan. And it reminds me of your boy, Mike Piazza, who at his Hall of Fame speech, one of the things he said is, no one rocks the house like Mets fans. And I
Yeah.
believe that true and true. So anyway, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, quickly on that, I don't know if I told you this, but I met Mike Piazza. You saw the picture, right? I met him at the Italian
Yeah,
Club
at the
a couple
Italian
months ago.
American
Yeah.
Club.
And when they were up on the dais there, they actually spoke about the 2000 World Series, him and Tino Martinez, which was cool because they weren't like busting balls or anything. They were just talking about how great it was for the city. And Tino was like, no matter what happened, we would always look at the lineup and say, God, I hope Piazza's not coming up this inning. I hope he's not coming up. And then he comes up. And unfortunately for Mets fans around the world, he flies out. But man, when Mariano makes that pitch and that ball hits in the air, every Yankee, their heart sinks. And there's even a video of Tino going, oh no. Unfortunately for the Mets fans, Bernie Williams comes down with it. Yankees win in 5. But I remember I was in high school at the time. And I remember walking down the hallways in school, and one side was all Yankees, the other side was Mets. Teachers that wore suits and ties every day were wearing their jerseys. It was crazy, man. It was nuts. There was an intensity even in the local high schools that is really unmatched. And my grandma, even to this day, she calls them by their first name. Like she'll say, "Did you see? It wasn't DeGrom, it was Jacob, right? It wasn't Syndergaard, it was Noah, right? I love that. It wasn't Alonso, it was Pete. So we'll see. We'll see how they fortify their roster. I hear they're in on Vlad Guerrero Jr. That would be a big deal. And if I'm the Mets, I would be all over that. Think about that lineup: Lindor, Guerrero Jr., and Juan Soto. Woo! Matt Matera and the whole Matera crew would love that one. Let's talk some Buccaneer football. Season's over, unfortunately, after what happened on Sunday night. And now, like I just mentioned before, you're getting interviews with Spytek, Greenberg. We know Liam Coen just wrapped up. I saw you tweeted it out. I tweeted it out after midnight, and then I saw you post something too. It's like, man, they're burning the midnight oil trying to interview this guy. Who do you think has the best chance of leaving? Is it Spytek? Is it Greenberg? Or is it Liam Coen?
Yeah, first of all, just real quick on the late night interview. I have a theory. I have nothing to back this up, but I have a theory that because he interviewed with the Jaguars, which of course is the Khan family. AEW Dynamite was last night, the return of Samoa Joe. I have a feeling Tony Khan, who is involved a lot with the Jaguars too, was like, hold on, let's wait for Dynamite to end, and then I'll come back and we'll do the interviews. That's my theory there.
I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong. I think that has a lot to do with it.
Because why else? And, Tony's kind of a quirky guy, if you will, a little bit. He's a little eccentric, a little out there, so it wouldn't shock me. He's like, yeah, let's just do the interview at 12:30 a.m. Like, no problem. But as far as who would be most likely to leave, I do think it's John Spytek, just based on what he's built. Obviously, Jason Light has built a lot of it in Tampa, but he's been one of his right-hand men. Because he's on the player personnel type of things. He also won a Super Bowl with the Broncos before he even came to Tampa and then helped build this roster to what it is today. He gets a lot of credit, too, for obviously bringing in Shaq Barrett, signing him when no one else really knew who Shaq Barrett was, helped with the JPP trade, was influential with Baker Mayfield coming to Tampa as well. And I think a lot of teams, when you look at trying to bring in a general manager, most teams go on the side of finding the player personnel type of guy versus the finances type of guy. Because if you can identify talent, you can figure out the contracts later. But it's finding the right people first, which to me is the biggest thing.
Yeah, and I wonder because I've heard that for years, but then you see certain situations where there's so much credit to put for these capologists, right? And you see what Julian Breezeball has been able to do for the Lightning, and we know that that's a huge reason why the Buccaneers have been able to stay successful over the last couple of years is that dead cap money that cripples these other teams. But they found a way, right? They found a way to kind of kick the can down the road with guys like Tom Brady, and you see that with Chris Godwin. I want to ask you about him in a second, but yeah, I think it's a good balance, right? I think the cap crunch, and I've been watching football my entire life, almost 40 years. I didn't hear anything about dead cap until recently, right? So they're finding these loopholes. They're finding these ways to stay competitive, which I think is extremely impressive. I'll ask you about Coen and the rest in a bit, but I just brought him up, so I want to ask you, What do you think the chances are that Chris Godwin returns to the Bucs next season? Because I look at the dead cap hit, and whether he's here or not, you're paying the guy over 18 million. I don't, Mike is making 20 and a half. I don't know if Chris coming off a second season ending injury is going to get 25, 26 million from somebody else. I just think it makes a lot of sense. Like, get a similar deal to Chris. The Bucs only have to shell out 2 or 3 more million per than they would have if, they weren't bringing him back. I just think it makes too much sense to have Chris, who just had a kid. Like, I just think it makes too much sense that Chris Godwin returns next season. Do you agree with that, or do you disagree?
I agree. I think there's a really good chance Chris Godwin comes back. I'm not going to say 100%, but in a weird way, we're kind of in a deja vu situation with Chris Godwin, because the last time he was a free agent, he's coming off of that torn ACL, and he was arguably the best wide receiver available. It was like him and Mike Williams and one other receiver a couple of seasons ago when he was a free agent, and Mike Williams got that deal first, which then made Chris Godwin the guy. This year, he's coming off a dislocated ankle, which, I'm not a medical expert, but a lot of people are saying it's a little bit easier to come back from that than the torn ACL. And really, the receivers available, only T. Higgins is like the top guy besides Chris Godwin. But the big thing for me is, and you know this as well, Jay, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans too, but in this case, Chris Godwin, he's cut from a different cloth. He's not the diva wide receiver. He's not just going to be like, I'm going to go to the highest bidder and that's it. Case closed. Chris Godwin has built a beautiful life here with him and his wife and now their young child. And congrats to him. He loves being in Tampa. He's in a great offense. I mean, up until his injury, he was third in the league in receiving yards. He played 7 games and had over 500 yards, 50 catches, and 5 touchdowns. He knows that if he comes back, he's going to be in that juggernaut of an offense once again, which still did pretty good without him, but it'll only be that much better with him returning. I think he's got to get over 20 million, but the Bucs have more cap room than they did last season, so they can go and give him that extra money. And I think the Bucs are also going to be smart about it and say, all right, we know we have Mike Evans for 1 more year. We'll see what happens after that. But, Mike is getting a little bit older now. Who knows how much longer he's going to be? Chris isn't 30 yet. He's getting close. But if you sign Chris to his next long-term deal, you have him under contract for a couple of more seasons. Jalen McMillan becomes your wide receiver too whenever Mike decides to hang it up. And you put Chris Godwin in a good position where he doesn't have to move his family. He knows he's going to produce for this team, which you never know when you go to a new team. It's a different fit. It's a different system. So I can't say 100%, but, man, I'd be surprised if he goes anywhere else besides Tampa.
I'm with you, man. I think 3 years, like 22 million per, you know what I mean? It gets him slightly above Mike. He's in that honey spot for some guys. If you want to bump it up a little more, as long as the Bucs can afford it. I mean, they figured out a way to bring these guys back. So it's almost like, all right, Chris, if you want to come back, just like with Mike, right? If you want to come back, we'll find a way. And we know that it was Mike Evans' wife going, why are we leaving? Why don't we just stay here in Tampa? I think the same thing is going to be with Chris Godwin and his entire situation. Who's going to be calling the plays next year is obviously the biggest question mark right now. We just alluded to that he wrapped up his interview last night with the Jacksonville Jaguars, but what does your gut tell you on Liam Coen? Does he stay here? Does he leave? And are you one of the people that believe that if he does try to leave, that the Buccaneers should make the move and say, all right, Todd, thank you, but we're going to Liam? Like, what is your whole thought process on the Liam Coen and then a lesser extent Todd Bowles situation?
My gut feeling is that Coen is still going to be back with the Buccaneers. And I know people were freaking out last night based on the late night interview, but the Jaguars are still interviewing other people. They're going to talk to Brian Flores. Robert Saleh has been in the mix as well, the former Jets head coach. So it's not like it's just
Todd Monken. That was another one, yeah.
Todd Monken as well, which is big time, which Todd Monken, for me, also plays into this whole carousel with the Buccaneers. Because if Liam Coen is not back, let me put it this way. If Liam Coen says, hey, I'm going to take the head coaching job with the Jaguars, I think the Bucs got to stay strong, make a move, and then make Liam Coen the head coach. I understand the stability that Todd Bowles has brought. When we look at last season, it wasn't like everyone's like, oh, no, the defense, we need to keep that intact. No, everybody's like, we need a new edge rusher. They need a new inside linebacker. They need a corner. Get rid of Jamel Dean. I just think more than anything else with Todd Bowles, who's had an okay run. Yes, he's won a bunch of division titles, but I don't know. The 8-9, 9-8, and then 10-7 isn't necessarily fooling me. It hasn't been a stellar performance. There's still a lot of issues with Todd Bowles. I get that we don't know if Liam Coen is like a leader among men and how it's going to work. But what I do know is Liam Coen is 39 years old, and he could be the next Sean McVay. Sure, he could be the next blown-up situation like Dirk Cutter and things like that, or Mike McDaniel. But are you willing to throw away somebody that has completely turned around the offense and is still going to be a juggernaut once again, a team that was averaging almost 30 points per game? Are you going to give that up with a guy that could be your head coach for the next decade, for a coach that has incrementally gotten better, and yet your side was the worst side of the team? Like, if you just put everything in a vacuum and you say, hey, we had 2 coordinators this year. We had a guy that was top 5 in offense and bottom 5 in defense. We're going to go, let's go with the guy that was bottom 5 in defense. Let's stick with that guy. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So as much as Todd Bowles has been important to this program, Liam Coen and the offense and the future of this team, I think, is where it should be. Now, the reason why it comes back to Todd Monken is if Coen does go, if you don't believe in Todd Bowles just then, Monken's not going to go from the Ravens to the Bucs to be an offensive coordinator. That makes no sense. But to become the head coach in Tampa, where he's worked with Baker Mayfield before, he's worked with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and he's lived in the Tampa area, that seems like not a bad idea to make him the head coach. So I'm not ready to move on from Todd Bowles just yet if Liam Coen decides to come back. But when there's a lot of pretty good options out there on the offensive side, it's tough to look at those and say, we don't want that because we believe that Todd's going to pick another great offensive coordinator and hit for the 3rd straight time in a row. I think that's really difficult to do.
Yeah, I guess my whole thing is like I want to believe that, and I understand what you and I had Scott on earlier this week. My whole thing is that when you just mentioned it too, and you're like, you need another edge rusher, you need to have talent on that side of the ball. And I think when you look at all 3 levels on defense, like they are missing talent. When you look at the Bucs offensive line, I mean, 4/5 of those guys were drafted by Jason Light. Ben Bredeson did a decent job. I think he ranked 95th out of 130. And you have Bucky Irving, and you have these guys on the outside. Even to start the year, you had Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. You drafted Jalen McMillan. Even had Rachaad White backing up. Sean Tucker was NFC Offensive Player of the Week. So as much as we want to give credit to Liam Coen, like he had horses on that side and some depth. And that's what worries me is that I don't think Todd Bowles had the same horses on the defensive side that Liam Coen had on the offensive side. So while I do give Liam Coen credit, I also think he had a lot more to work with. And my issue is that everybody thinks that if there's a change, it automatically people think that change is going to be better. Well, we've also seen a team in the last 2 years where they've had long sustained losing streaks in the middle of the season and not one person complained. Nobody bitched, nobody moaned. Even Lavonte David came out the other day in locker room saying nobody's talking crap about Todd Bowles. Like, Matt, you know as well as I do, we're not just football fans. We see this in other sports. When losing streaks happen, there's usually some murmurs. Yeah. There's some people bitching and complaining like, man, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Whether it's defensively, guys on defense looking at him going, man, Todd doesn't know what he's doing. Or guys on offense like, damn, we're carrying the water, right? And why well, we haven't heard that 2 years in a row. And people forget at the end of 2 years ago when they needed a win to make the playoffs, I mean, they shut out the Panthers 9-0. So people look at the 9 with Canales, but I look at the 0 with Todd Bowles. So, you know, he has a track record of having some good defenses when he's able to have the players to complement his scheme. I'm worried, man. I'm worried that that we get so caught up with the shiny object going, he could be the next Sean McVay. I mean, they said that about Josh McDaniel. Wow, he worked with Brady. He could do that with anybody. They said that with Adam Gase. He worked with Peyton Manning. You know Adam Gase. You know what I mean? Like, think those things kind of worry me. And I have more faith in we would be asking Liam Coen to do something he's never done before, and that's be a head coach. And people are more concerned with Todd finding another offensive coordinator when there's a track record that he's been able to do it. There's no track record of Liam Coen being a head coach. There's a track record of him being a play caller. So can you kind of see that aspect of it too, where there's?
I understand. I get it. I completely understand. Like the grass isn't always greener, but like Todd Bowles' career head coaching record isn't that good. Like we're not talking about a guy that's winning 13 games consistently. And I push back a little bit on, Coen had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, but then also Mike and Chris got hurt. And the offense didn't really miss a beat with those two guys out. He still found ways to put points on the board with Cade Otton as your leading receiver. And then Cade Otton got hurt, and they were able to make Payne Durham and Devin Culp, the Culp of personality, something. Late into the season as well. And yes, injuries played a big factor with Todd Bowles in that side of the defense. If Bryce Hall didn't break his leg in the first week of the season, I think that makes a big difference. But you can also look at the Detroit Lions, who had even more injuries than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did. And Aaron Glenn put up a great performance against the Vikings in that last game of the season when they had to win, the number one seed, or else they were playing against Los Angeles in Phoenix last week. So I understand injuries are a big part of it, but then you got to change your game plan a little bit. Like the middle of the field got attacked over and over and over again. We saw the Cowboys game, the Saints game, the Commanders with 4:41 left on the clock. You got to get a stop. And every single time, these teams would run the same exact plays, like just 5 yards down the field, get an extra 2 yards on the catch and run, get out of bounds, and bam, set yourself up into field goal range. So it's the consistent ongoing problems with Bowles over and over and over again. I understand people were not in there. Like Antoine Winfield Jr. probably saved Todd Bowles a good amount last year with, you mentioned the 9-0 game. Well, that was going to be a touchdown until Antoine Winfield Jr. knocked the ball out. So injuries are a factor, and Todd does bring a lot of good things. You're absolutely right about the locker room sticking together. But I'd also argue that maybe, and sure, you don't know until you're actually in the situation, but what about just not getting into those 4 and 5 game losing streaks that Bowles has done over the last 2 years? Maybe part of the reason why guys weren't panicking is because you play in the NFC South, which objectively sucks. It's the worst division in football. They got in because the other teams are bad. You could argue the AFC South as well is pretty bad, but the Bucs have been very lucky to play in a really bad division over the past 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, I see that, and the other thing is like they've won games outside of their division. It'd be one thing if they played in such a bad division where they're going 6-0 against everybody else. They lost both games against Atlanta, right? And they went into Detroit to win that game. They went cross country to LA and shut out the Chargers in the second half. It's a playoff team. So I mean, I think you look at it on both sides, and you and I both know, like, as much as people want to say, oh, look at Todd and this and that, like, this isn't Todd Bowles from the Jets. Like, we have to keep things, and this is part of the reason. And again, I go back to what I've been saying ever since they elevated him. If it falls apart like it did with the Jets, this is not a good idea. Matt, you and I both know he 5 games and 4 games the last 3 years with the Jets. You're talking about a guy not getting worse every 3 years, incrementally, even if it's a little bit, he's getting better. So I feel like we're in a position where I understand what everybody wants, and I understand that there's a trend in this league, but I also feel like there's parts of this that need to be accounted for, of the team staying together, the lack of talent on the defensive side of the ball, and then possibly they're 10-7 this year, right? We're talking about a team that was the worst team in all 4 major sports before Tom Brady was here. So I don't know, man. I think it's a good discussion back and forth, but I look at Liam Coen and I just hope he pulls the Ben Johnson. It'd be a lot easier if this team wasn't good. It'd be a lot easier if the team didn't make the playoffs. It was like, all right, Todd, thank you. But they still found a way, right? I want to ask you about Lavonte David, because I know there's been kind of differing opinions on whether they think he's going to be back next year. He looks super emotional in the locker room, and that to me was it was tough to see, because I know he's a guy that he's very stoic and very soft-spoken, that, but it was a little different. It seemed like it hit him harder. What is your gut telling you? You think Lavonte returns next season?
I do. I think if you ask Lavonte right now and you gave him truth serum, he would say, I'm done. It's been a good career. I'm hanging it up. But you got to remember, the season just ended. He's probably exhausted. His body's still probably beat up. But I have a feeling when March rolls around, then it's free agency, and you see some moving parts, and you see who the Bucs pick up in free agency and all the rumors and stuff like that. I think when he has a little more time to reflect, a little more time to ponder his future, he's going to remember what he loves about the game of football. And clearly he doesn't have a lot of time left. I still think he can play at a pretty good level. Pass coverage is a bit of an issue, but hey, he had 5.5 sacks this year. I think he's still really good at stopping the run. The biggest thing for me, and only Lavonte can answer this, is, and he's won a Super Bowl, so it's not like he has to ring chase or anything like that. But you're leaving a team, regardless of who's the head coach and who's the offensive coordinator, you're leaving a team that, in my opinion, is still in a really good spot to contend for a Super Bowl.
Right.
It still feels like they're on the up and up. Do you want to leave that right now when you have another chance at getting a Super Bowl? I think, again, right now, he's probably thinking, I'm done. I've done everything that I possibly can. But give it another 2 months when you're a little more refreshed, when you can recharge the batteries a little bit. And that's where I think Lavonte may be more intrigued to come back to the Bucs.
Bigger disappointment, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka or Kyle Trask?
Joe Tryon-Shoyinka.
Yeah.
I just think, he was supposed to be the next guy to take over for JPP, and even Shaq to a degree. You're not really going to complain too much with Kyle Trask when he's backing up Tom Brady, and then Baker Mayfield has done what he's done over the last 2 seasons. You can argue all you want. It was a bad second-round pick, and that's probably true. But again, for a team that has made the postseason 5 years in a row, won a Super Bowl. I know Kyle Trask was still at Florida at that time, but won 4 straight divisions. It's tough to complain about a guy that's hasn't really factored into that success.
What do you see with Rachaad White? I mean, obviously lost his starting gig to Bucky Irving, and Bucky's going to be all the rage going into next year. People are going to be drafting him high in fantasy. He's already getting the chance there at Raymond James Stadium, Matt. What does that mean for a guy like Rachaad White? Because listen, he is a RB1. He was telling everybody that can hear, like he was making the rounds before the season. He was excited. He wanted to be a Pro Bowler, and unfortunately, by the end of the year, he was the backup to the rookie out of Oregon. So, what do you make of Rachaad White's future here in Tampa Bay?
Rachaad's still a very solid running back and probably would be a starter on a number of teams, but Bucky Irving is just on a different level. He's faster. I think he can read the blocking and the holes a little bit better, and he's always just going forward. He's always making somebody miss. With that said, Rachaad White is still the best pass blocking running back on this team, which is very important. I mean, we saw in that game against the Commanders when Bucky was in, he was getting pushed all the way back. I love the pony package. I love when Bucky and Rachaad are on the field together. But I said this before the season even started. I see Rachaad White in like an Alvin Kamara role where he can be as effective as Bucky Irving, but in the passing game, in throwing situations, in screens and all that stuff. And he has been. It was a little odd down the stretch, not necessarily seeing that. I don't think Rachaad should go into next season being a guy that only gets like 2 rushing attempts per game. Bucky should still get the bulk, but Rachaad should definitely be mixed in. He's a good player. I don't know what his future would be once his contract is done, because a lot of times you're not going to give a big contract to a running back, especially a third down guy. So I think he certainly has a future in the NFL, but once his initial contract is done with the Bucs, we'll kind of see where the chips fall, how the running back room looks then, what type of improvement Sean Tucker makes. And Rachaad White will be in this league for a while because third down running backs can always find a home somewhere. So I'm optimistic for his overall NFL career. But, as long as Bucky Irving's in Tampa, Rashaad's going to be RB2.
Yeah, that's true. And it's crazy because you think of a guy like Sean Tucker, right? Like, guys, there's probably other teams out there like, damn, we wish we had a third running back like that, right?
No doubt about it. A couple of miscues from Sean Tucker, though. Like, the game against the Saints, he gets in the game and you're trying to burn clock and he just runs out of bounds. I didn't totally get that. He fumbled it against the Giants and didn't really get many opportunities after that. He had that weird thing on the kickoff as well where he didn't know whether to play it or not, so he got tackled at the 5-yard line. So a couple mental errors have come from Sean Tucker, but he's got a ton of talent when he's running the football. He's another guy that needs to figure it out a little bit in the passing game. But, I mean, when you have the talent to be an NFC Offensive Player of the Week, when, like, you just got playing time out of nowhere based on other injuries, I'm excited for him, too. I love this running back room. I think it's one of the best running back rooms in all of football. They all do something a little bit different to help this team. And, injuries happen in the NFL. If one of those guys goes down, you still feel pretty good about the offense and what they can do with the other 2 guys.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? How things have changed in just a year or so when you're like, I don't know about this running back room. And now it's like, yeah, I kind of really like this running back.
Yeah.
So are you AEW over WWE like 100% now? Like, is that, you think?
No, I haven't really watched AEW in a while. Like when I reference AEW, I saw the clips on Twitter and stuff.
Okay.
It's like anything else. It comes and goes. It all depends on the storylines. Like I'm a big MJF guy, as you know, he's from the most magical place on planet Earth.
Yeah.
So when he's in the mix, I don't really care about Jeff Jarrett. So I don't really care about that storyline. But a lot of times MGF is doing something cool. I'll watch. But then, yeah, now WWE has been hot with the Netflix stuff. The Rock was back. Cody and Kevin Owens, I think, is going to be awesome with that ladder match. The Royal Rumble is always one of my favorite pay-per-views. The Bloodline stuff is great. Roman Reigns back in the mix. So I really just hop to wherever the best storyline is. I don't choose like one over the other because I think that's stupid. Like, they're all here for entertainment and stuff like that. Why would you be so loyal to one company and then not another? Like, the guys go back and forth between companies. They're friends with guys in other companies. Like, just enjoy it all. That doesn't have to be necessarily a rivalry.
All right, 2 quick questions before I let you leave. Who wins the Royal Rumble, and who does John Cena fight at WrestleMania?
Oh, man. Well, I kind of think John Cena is going to win the Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
I guess Cody. John Cena versus Cody would be really cool.
I was thinking the same thing.
Because he could win Money in the Bank. He could win, right? Because he doesn't just have to win that.
No, and that's
I don't want to see CM Punk win. I don't know. I'll stick with John Cena just because I love him. Him and The Rock are like my 2 favorite wrestlers, so I'll go with John Cena. John Cena versus Cody. That's my official pick.
I think that's somehow they're going to get to that, but I just wonder too if, like, don't you want John Cena to be in Elimination Chamber too? So if that's the case, then I don't think he would win the Royal Rumble. I mean.
Now that I think of it, they'll probably be like, this is John Cena's last chance to contend for a championship. Exactly. So they don't want to do it too quickly with Indy in the Royal Rumble. So that makes a lot of sense.
I could see I know they're probably going to want to go one-on-one, but I would love to see a Roman Reigns, John Cena, Cody Rhodes triple threat match. I think that would be
cool.
Some point, some form or fashion. I think that'd be great. Matt Matera, Pewter Report, the one and only. I appreciate you, buddy. Thank you so much. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks as always, Jay. Have a good one.
You too.